What's that? Okay. This is the November 17th meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. This open meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on July 16th, 2022. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The act allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. I'll now take attendance. When I call your name, please say something to indicate you're here. Julianne Hirsch.
Here.
Amy Paretsky.
Here.
Millie Milton.
Here.
Ashley Davies.
Here.
Tracy Camarano.
Here.
Adrian Cost. Bill Peterson. Fran Baxton.
Here.
Gene Kennedy.
Here.
Gene Cahill. Rick Leaf here. John Campbell. And Daria, we know, is not going to make it tonight. From the staff, Lori Connors.
Here.
And representing Weston Sampson, we have Jonathan Law, our project manager. Jonathan, is anyone else going to be here tonight from Weston Sampson?
You just have me again, Rick.
Just have you. Okay, we're glad to have you tonight. Okay, having done the attendance, we can start the agenda of the meeting. First item, which will be our standard first item going forward here while we're doing the downtown study, is to get an update from Weston Sampson on where things stand. So I'll turn this over to Jonathan, our project manager, for an update. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thanks, Rick. Good evening, everybody. I'll begin by sharing my screen here. Can everybody see my screen?
You can see it.
Minimize this. Trying to get full screen. Is that big enough for everybody to see?
Yep.
Okay. So good evening, everybody. Again, this is the second monthly meeting that we've attended since the project began. What I will do at each one of those meetings is basically go over the progress that has been made since the prior meeting when we all met. So with that, I'll go to the agenda. So I'll just give a quick reminder of the project study area and then the project schedule and then where we are on the schedule. I'll quickly go over work that we've completed since the last meeting. So that's another overview or a collation of the current survey results. We've put together some present imagery of streetscape and open space potentials. And then finally, we'll finish on the next steps as we move forward. So just to remind everybody, this is a project study area. The primary red dash line is the main study area that we're going to focus on as part of this master plan implementation. The yellow shows the secondary areas, and then the orange shows the secondary areas, and then finally the yellow shows the areas beyond that. We're now in the middle of November, if you can believe it. Christmas is just around the corner. The red dash line indicates where we are on the schedule. So if you look at, for example, the bottom section, community engagement, we're into the business and stakeholder interviews. We've concluded 2 of those at present, and there's 1 scheduled for next week. And I met with Laurie and Rick on Monday, and we've been given another couple of names of people to reach out to. And then in due course, there will be a workshop with a broader set of folks who want to give input on this project as we move forward. So the work completed since the last meeting, we submitted a proposal for the main study area for a traffic count analysis. And you may be wondering why we've done that. Well, this scope wasn't included in the RFP that was issued by the town. After further consideration, we think that it's smart for us for any design concept that we come up with to discuss that with Mass DOT. So I think you'll all agree that if we want to move this project forward, we obviously want to do that in the best interest of everybody. And if that means an analysis of the current traffic patterns, and we can actually lose some travel lanes through the heart of downtown to create more space for open space, wider sidewalks, parking, and things like that, we need to have those discussions with Mass DOT. Now, Mass DOT have a current complete streets guidelines that they like projects to adhere to, and it includes all the things that I just mentioned previously. However, if we go to Mass DOT with some designs and say, we'd like to incorporate some road diet implementation on this project, they'll say, sure, show us some traffic counts, show us your analysis of whether this design can be sustainable in the long term. So that's why we submitted this proposal to take in some traffic counts to help us as we move along with the design process. As I mentioned, we have collated the latest online survey results, and you'll see in the next slide that the numbers on that and participation in that are actually going down. So I'd like to get feedback from everybody today as whether we can close that online survey or if we keep it open a little bit longer, but I'll go through that afterwards. We've had further coordination with the town staff and, continue to review the previous studies. And then RKG have begun the stakeholder engagement, spoke to Norm Corbin on November 10th. Both RKG and myself spoke to Millie this week. It was a great conversation. I think she can back that up. Don't just take my word for it. And then we'll be speaking to John next week. We would have spoken to him this week, but he was out of work, so that'll be next week.
Before you get off this slide, can you go back to the slide just for a second, Jonathan? Just to provide a little more information on the first bullet. As during the site walk, when I was talking to some of the people on the site walk, and then since the site walk, it's become apparent that Mass DOT might be more amenable to considerations of how to redesign Route 20 through the center of town, if in fact enough data is provided to substantiate what could be done and what we might want to do. I think that there's always been kind of a conception we're just going to have to live with Route 20 the way it is, and that's not to say that the state is going to agree to major changes on Route 20, but they may agree to certain changes. And I thought it was kind of encouraging to know that something could be done on the Route 20 corridor, through the center of town. As Jonathan mentioned, this was not including the original scope. And so the proposal that they have going to John Kadir for review right now is asking for another $10,000 to complete this traffic study. And John needs to review that and concur with that from the town's perspective. I think Jonathan was telling us that the sooner this could be done, the better. It probably doing this during the holiday season may not get us the most accurate traffic count. So it's still a little bit up in the air on that. And if you're not aware, John Kadir came down with COVID, was out of the office for quite a while here. So we're just trying to get re-engaged with him. But there's a lot of potential that could come out of the numbers that come out of this traffic study. And we could end up, with some fairly creative designs for what to do about making the whole Route 20 situation through the center of town more acceptable, if in fact we can get some traffic data done. So, I really support what's going on here, and hopefully John can review this and give a decision on this fairly quickly. I don't know, Lori, anything else to add on that?
I did speak with John, and one of his concerns was that he was afraid that something else may potentially come up. And then we wouldn't have any money to pay for that. So he did ask me to reach out to the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission to see if they could provide the traffic counts for free, which would, I mean, they probably won't do the analysis. So we may need Weston and Sampson to do that. And I did reach out to them today and forwarded the desired locations, and they're going to get back to me. There were some concerns about the lateness of the year and whether their equipment would work in the winter time, given the cold temperatures. So I'm waiting to hear from them whether that's something that they could do. And then I will certainly report back as soon as I hear.
Okay, that's good information.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Would it help, Rick, if we as a committee sent a letter to John and talked about how important it was? Like, I think if the consultants find it important, and it seems like the downtown and the main street is a major part of it, that $10,000 is a small number to, you know, not go forward with it. Say CMRPC, they've been really busy, or their equipment doesn't work, you know. I'm sure
I do
there
have a question. I do have a question for Jonathan. One of the things that they had mentioned is the possibility of doing the traffic counts when the weather is a little bit warmer in the spring. Would that be too late for your purposes?
Yeah, I mean, if I go back to the schedule here, yeah, I mean, April, you know, we're supposed to finish this in the end of April. And as I mentioned to both you and Rick on the call this week, that these traffic counts will not prohibit us from finishing this study on time. If it goes into the spring, then obviously we can't really go into full design mode within the corridor of Route 20 without this information. So, I mean, we could certainly look at other sections of the downtown main study area, but as far as Route 20 and coming up with concepts there, we can't really do that in an educated way without these studies, because they kind of lead the approach.
I mean, I agree with Amy. I think when a lot of us came into this knowing that the downtown is the most important thing in the master plan, and that, you know, a lot of us envisioned some pretty big work happening in the Route 20 corridor. So I think it's a small price for something that will be really key to this design, and I think we all expected it to potentially be a part of it. So I would hate to skimp or have it delayed, have them work on the design without this information.
I agree with that.
Well, what I could do is I could contact John tomorrow on behalf of the committee and just you know, relay what was discussed tonight, what the committee's position is, and get some feedback from John and just see where we take it. But I could certainly make the committee's position known to John tomorrow.
I wonder, though, if we should just wait until I hear back from Sujatha from CMRPC to see if it's possible that they, so she had to confer with a traffic engineer who kind of coordinates the traffic counts. And so she couldn't give me a solid answer when I spoke to her today. So I wonder if we should just find the answer to that question, because that's what John's going to ask. You know, he directed me to reach out to CMRPC, so he's going to want to know the answer to that question before he's going to give approval one way or the other.
I think the counts themselves, and again, I don't know the full breakdown, are actually the cheapest part of, you know, the proposal. It's actually the analysis and then figuring out what those counts actually mean and how they affect, you know, the road diet is the meat and bones of that proposal. So you would save some money, but probably not as much as you think.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I just need something clarified. If CMRPC does the count, they don't necessarily do the analysis, right? Is that what you- Yeah, so that also if we wait to hear from CMRPC, then we have to wait until our next meeting to agree that we as a group would like to send some kind of message of support to John Cordere. So
You
that
could make it contingent. So you could say, provided that CMRPC cannot do the traffic counts within the next 2 weeks or whatever the case may be, then, we suggest sending a letter recommending that he sign the traffic study additional service request for Weston and Sampson. So you could do
Well,
something like that.
So as I mentioned, I think we might have a little bit more time than the next couple of weeks because, as I mentioned, Laurie and Rick on the call, doing the counts between Thanksgiving and Christmas is generally not the ideal time to do it because there's more traffic for people Christmas shopping and visiting family and things of that nature. So the counts can actually be off.
Mhm.
The whole point of doing this is to get an accurate count of regular traffic movements on this Route 20 corridor. And if the traffic counts are increased for a certain period of time during the year, then that's not really going to help us to achieve the results we want because it might come back and say, actually, this road is actually designed perfectly for the amount of traffic on here, but the traffic has been elevated because of the holiday period. So, ideally, we wanted to do it prior to this. We sent the proposal in a couple of weeks ago. So waiting until maybe January now, if that's the case, I think that's okay because that still gives us enough time to be able to produce the concepts for the deadline in the spring. So I don't think it's such a big rush to get a decision in the next week or so.
So what is the latest time frame that you need those traffic counts by? Ideally.
I would say middle to end of January would be ideal.
So Jonathan, if in fact CMRC did the data collection, how much did you estimate that would reduce the cost of the?
Again, Rick, I don't know what the breakdown of that proposal is. So I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Could you look into that? Could you look into that and get back to Lori with?
Yeah, I can.
I mean, I think it'd be an important piece of information for John to know exactly how much this is going to save so that he knows one way or another, he's still going to have to end up approving something in addition to what's already been approved.
Would you say it's typical that one person or one party does the data collection and then somebody else does an analysis on another business's data? I might be concerned there's some questions on the people doing the analysis don't know how the data was collected or what their means of collection were.
I don't think that matters who collects the data because I believe our transportation department subcontract that out to someone to undertake the counts, and then they get the information, and that's how they pull that all together in the form of a report and figure out the road diet.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess what I'm hearing is that our approach is going to be for Lori to see what she hears back from CM, whatever it's called, Central Mass Planning. John is going to give us an updated estimate of what impact that would have on the cost proposal if Weston and Sampson didn't do the collection. And then based on that, we'll follow up with John. Lori will provide the information. I will at least provide an update to John based on what came out of tonight's meeting as to the position of the committee. And I guess we also now have the information that as long as we get the traffic study completed sometime in the mid-January timeframe, it doesn't have an impact on the actual project schedule. Which would be something else that would be a major concern of ours as a committee if the schedule started to be impacted here. So,
Mhm.
so we'll gather some information. I'll convey to John kind of the what came out of this discussion tonight in the committee, and then see if we can't over the next couple of weeks, get a commitment as to how we're going to go forward with this, and if in fact there's other information that we need to bring back before the committee, we'll figure out the best way to do that, whether we have to call a in-between committee meeting or do something. Well, I guess we can't do anything over email as a public body here. We'll just have to figure out how we proceed once we get the data for the next step. But I would assume the committees, from what I'm hearing from the discussion here, is that that the committee right now is in favor of John approving either what's been proposed or a different proposal that Weston Sampson could work with that would also get the same thing accomplished. Any other questions or comments about this? Okay, just want to make sure everybody had a clear idea of what was behind that bullet. Okay, let's go on.
Okay. As I mentioned, we downloaded the latest survey results on Monday this week, and this is the response timeline. So as you can see, it's been open since around August. The main advertisement was done in early September, so you can see the peaks of the middle week in September, and then it started to drop off so much so that around the last month or so, it's been around the same number of responses each week. I'll just go over a couple more of the results. So again, the resident, business owner, or visitor, strong number of residents showing up. And I spoke to Rick and Laurie about this the other day and said, perhaps some of these people are business owners but responded under a resident, but it still doesn't equate to only 3 business owners responding. So we think that number should be higher up. And now that RKG has started that interactions with the local property owners and business community, we can get feedback from them that way. Again, people who have lived in Northborough for a while or who own property in Northborough is 528 people own a property and live in Northborough. So that's great that so many residents are actually contributing to this survey and the future of this project. And you can see the numbers up here. So previously we had 474 responses. So we've had a good few more responses in that month since we kept it open. Same here, there's little in downtown that interests people. Not enough parking. I assume that means not enough on-street parking. It's unattractive and it's too congested. So it's the same narrative that we've heard from the moment the survey opened. And then if we just look at some of the responses that people would like to see downtown, they're all kind of related. They're to do with shopping, restaurants, drinking establishments, pubs, and then places for farmers markets. So you can see there's a connectivity between those 4 major responses that people would like to see in downtown. These next few slides, I'm just going to go over just to sort of pique people's interests and get ideas or throw ideas out there of what is attainable or what could be attainable in this project. And I know I don't want people to be taken aback by the scale of the buildings in the Kennedy Greenway image, because it's more about the space between the buildings. It's not about the skyscrapers or the large hotels or big developments around. It's about, how can we generate open space that brings people or engages people into downtown Northborough. So, for example, in this image, the Rose Kennedy Greenway fountain is a huge generator to bring families and kids down to the Greenway. And then in turn, they go in the restaurants, they go to the stores, and, it just brings vitality and also regeneration to the downtown, this downtown area of Boston. And it's not to say that couldn't work in Northborough. Same with the street in Chestnut Hill. So, as we spoke to Millie earlier this week, we talked about how, many years ago, towns and cities were kind of destroyed by the mall. Businesses moved out and people stayed away from downtown and sort of shopped in the mall. Now the trend is to make these urban malls that are more like a downtown urban environment and bring people back to these types of establishments. And the one in Chestnut Hill is a great example of that. And again, I think this is very possible in downtown Northborough because of the footprints that we have within that main study area. I actually took my kids here the other week and they had a great time. But then, this then talks about, relates back to the survey that we saw. Do we have flexible open spaces that can allow food truck accommodations and parties and gatherings like that? I know we have Applefest. But are there other times of year where we could sustain, events like this, and again, have reasons for people to come downtown? Also, nighttime use. Do we have to limit this to daylight hours? I don't think so. If we create great urban spaces that includes, nightlife, restaurants, bars, then people will come. So again, that's on the list. And the image on the left is a street in Holland, and it's called a Woonerf. And what that is a street that has uses for cars, bikes, and pedestrians, all at equal measures. So you'll see that there is a two-lane, I won't say roadway going down the middle of the street, but cars can go down the street in both directions. But there's no dominant mode of transportation on the street. So you can see people walking down the middle of the street, walking down the side of the street, and bicyclists driving hand in hand with the vehicles at the same time. So, again, I think there's moments in Northborough that could sustain this. I'm not talking about Route 20, but I'm talking about other streets within Northborough themselves. And then, as I mentioned, hopefully when the traffic studies are complete, that we can actually reduce the road diet along Route 20 and incorporate bike lanes, or in the very least, at least some on-street parking. A couple more images here. This is actually Concord, New Hampshire, which is a project that I worked on in my previous firm. So not too dissimilar to Northborough. I know it's a bigger city. Northborough's a town, but this is a bigger city. But the project was very similar in the fact that it had a 4-lane highway actually going through downtown, and we did traffic counts and coordinated with New Hampshire DOT, and reduced this road diet from 2 lanes in each direction to 1 lane in each direction. That allowed us to get much wider sidewalks, so that in turn helped us to plant more street trees. I think there was maybe 5 trees on this section of Concord when we started, and I think there was over 75 planted in the end. But it allows for outside dining, more places for people to sit, and still wider ADA compliant sidewalks. And then the final image, again, touches on, if we do plant street trees, what is the best way to plant them? Because the last thing that we want to do is, propose all these new street trees and then have them not be planted in an environment or in a location that helps to sustain growth over a long period of time. There's so much technology out there, even with how you plant trees these days. So the image on the right is a silver cell planting system, and basically what that is a plastic grid of columns, let's say, that are placed beneath the sidewalk structure that supports the weight of the sidewalk, and the voids within this these plastic columns are filled with planting soil. And then that allows the roots from the trees to grow within the voids of these plastic columns and find, a healthy way to grow and to be, sustainable for many, many years to come. And then, you know, just thinking about how we have approaches to stormwater management, you know, low impact design approach, rather than throwing all the stormwater runoff into the existing or future underground storm water facilities that the town currently has. You know, we can look at rain gardens because we widen the sidewalks. It gives us more opportunity to approach stormwater management in a different way. So then next steps.
Just before I jump to this, just go back
Yep.
to this picture. So just any comments or questions, or, I mean, is this a lot of, does these things sort of grab your attention, or sort of these things kind of what you had in mind individually? I just like some feedback about what you're seeing here tonight.
I
Anybody?
really like a lot of these ideas. I had never heard of the Silva-Cell planting system. I have concerns about the plastic. I don't know if there are other, you know, alternatives to, you know, the materials that they use for that, but I like the idea of having a structure in place to really support the growth of the tree. And just all of the kind of photos you've shown and the design ideas you've shown, I think are great. And I do see places where we can potentially integrate them.
If you go back one more slide, Jonathan. Maybe one more beyond that.
I thought he was trying to spot me, Rick, in this slide.
Yeah, this one on the right here, you know, it doesn't look too dissimilar to kind of what Northborough looks like now as far as the building types and sizes and shapes, and, you know, that if we could do something with Route 20 that looked like that, that would be a major step in the right direction.
Yeah, and you know, Rick, that all depends on what we can do with, you know, with the road diet. You know, if we can reduce travel lanes, then, you know, that gives us the space to be able to do something like this, or at least, you know, be able to study, you know, how we can best utilize that extra room that's being allowed by removing travel lanes.
Mhm.
I mean, if people don't know Concord, New Hampshire, it was really a transformative project for not just Concord, but the area as a whole. And what it did, more than provide ADA compliance to sidewalks, provides trees, and just beautified the area and made it much more walkable. It was a catalyst for future regeneration in downtown. So what I mean by that is, after the project was complete, a lot of the developers who were in and around the area saw what this project did, and they started to invest their money in downtown Concord. You know, the number of storefronts that were vacant significantly reduced. There was a new hotel development that came to the main street in Concord. So it was a much bigger picture than a reduced road diet and some nice sidewalks. And that's what we hope that this study and this master plan can achieve in Northborough.
I 1000% agree with that, Jonathan. I lived in and spent a lot of time in Concord, and it was just dreadful for 20 years. And because there was a mall that went in, and a lot of the downtown traffic and businesses went out that way, and it was vacant. And to see it come back to life, and knowing that you guys you were involved in that, is really very, very heartening.
Other comments or questions? Any particular pictures stood out to anybody, either positively or negatively?
Jonathan, I have a question for you about the Concord project. How many years ago was that done?
I think it's been completed about, I want to say 5 years ago now.
5 years?
So around 2017, I think construction ended. Construction itself took 2 years. So how they did that was they constructed it in sections, but they didn't go they went block by block, but what they did is they did it block by block, but one side, the north side of the street, and then south side of the street. So they completed the north side first, and then when they did that, they turned to the south side.
Do you have any photos that you could share of the before and after, like maybe aerial photos?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, that'd be awesome. I'd be very curious to see. Of course, I'm familiar with Concord, but just recently.
Okay. Anything else before we move on to the rest of Jonathan's presentation? I think there's some really good ideas in here, and there's a lot I think that could be accomplished as we go forward with this. All right.
So then next steps, again, Rick and Laurie and I talked about this week in our pre-meeting to this meeting about closing the online survey, but Rick wanted to get everybody's input on the committee as to whether we do that.
So what do we, let's just bring that up to the committee. I mean, what do people feel? Seems like response levels have gone down quite a bit. We've done some good information. Is anybody opposed to closing the survey down at this point?
No.
I have an opinion.
No, go ahead.
I think that if we're going to close it, we should let people know that they have 2 more weeks or something and then close it.
We do that.
That's reasonable. Yeah.
So we say we close it at November 30th.
Today's the 17th. So yeah, I think that that's, but I mean, that's just my opinion, but.
I agree with you. Yeah. Yeah.
How would we communicate that?
Mhm.
Well, I can announce it at Board of Selectmen meeting, and when you go on the town website, maybe it could say, last days to do your survey.
Could that be done, Laura? Could somebody add it to the town website to put a notification up there that the survey will be open until November 30th, something like that?
Sure. We can do that, absolutely.
Are there any kind of blast emails that go out to the town in general from town hall or not?
Just when we put something up for the first time, there's a blast email that goes out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't typically refresh. It just goes out once unless it is meant to refresh.
It's a good
Maybe.
idea, though, maybe to send out a blast email.
If we could
I
send out-
did. The
send
past
out
week,
one-
I've been sending out on Facebook a couple times, a day or 2 left to the survey. Anyone who hasn't done it, please do it. But I didn't get a lot of, feedback.
Well, you could do that a couple more times, Amy, and maybe, a one-time blast email combined with what Julianne may say at a selectmen's meeting and a notice on the website.
I
That'll
think
sort of be our-
there's a couple different Facebook groups that we could tackle, Amy, you and I.
Yeah,
There's a few of them that I think we could both put something out on.
okay, sounds good.
All right, so we'll communicate as best we can and we'll keep it open until the 30th of November. Then maybe Jonathan, at the next meeting, you can give us one final update about, did anything else of such consequence come in since this meeting tonight?
Sure.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, RKG are going to continue with their market analysis. Then there'll be a workshop with a broader group of business owners. We'll continue with the information gathering, and then, as we talked about, we were hoping to begin the traffic count study pending approval. And that's where we're at.
Great. Any other questions or comments or anything for Jonathan before we end this part of the agenda? Hearing none. Thanks a lot, Jonathan. Like I said, if you can get back to Lori with an estimate of what the new cost of the traffic study would be if you did not do the counts, so that can be communicated to John. And, Lori, why don't you let me know what's going on with the Central Mass planning, and I'll probably just send a quick email to John for tomorrow morning, just to give him an update of what the committee talked about tonight and kind of where that all stands.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
very
same to
much.
you.
Bye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is to get a quick update on where things stand with the prioritization of the projects for the complete streets and how and when we file that with the state. Go ahead, Lori.
All right, so of course we met with the Board of Selectmen. We did a public outreach session on October 17th. And it seemed to be well attended, and folks seemed very interested. We got some good solid feedback on folks' priorities from that meeting. And then I got, I think it was 4 follow-up emails for people who weren't able to provide their priorities that night, but they wanted to share their priorities at a later date. So we have already gone through the list of projects and came up with a preliminary list ranking. And now the last step in the process is to look at the public outreach, the public input for the priority projects, and make sure that the ranking is reflective of what people think are the highest priority projects. So what that means is that if we have, a couple, say a list of 4 projects that are pretty much ranked the same, but the public thinks that one project is more important than the others, then that will receive a higher ranking than the other projects will. So we're hoping to complete that ranking within the next week or so. And then we will schedule to appear before the Board of Selectmen with our prioritization plan, get the final blessing from the Board of Selectmen, and then we will submit to Mass DOT for approval. So that's where things stand right now.
Okay. Do you have any, based on your past experience, any idea once this goes to Mass DOT, what the time frame is to A, hear back, and B, actually get some money?
So from what I recall from years ago, when I went through the prioritization plan process, there was a few months gap from when we submitted to when we heard. And then the response that we received was that they weren't totally happy with our prioritization plan and they wanted additional information. So we provided that additional information, and then their final turnaround was pretty fast after that. So the next funding round is May. So that is the earliest that we could possibly submit construction projects. Of course, remember, we are capped at $500,000 over a 4-year time frame. So we may not be interested in jumping the gun to submit projects for the first eligible funding round, because once we complete this process, the visioning process, I envision that we will go for design of a phase 1 project, and the Complete Streets program only funds shovel-ready projects. So the design, chances are, will be a year. So we may want to think carefully about the timing of when we want to submit projects if we're hoping to have the Complete Streets program fund, at least in part, our phase 1 project.
All right, so there's quite a few steps left to complete.
There is, yes.
Okay. But it sounds like at least getting a prioritized list that best reflects the public input and getting the selectmen to approve going forward. Nothing can happen until that gets done. So that's kind of all within our control. After that, we're kind of at the mercy of the state.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, might be a good idea when you know when the presentation of selectmen is going to be scheduled. You know, obviously their agenda will become public, but it might be a good idea just to get an email out to the committee, give them a heads up that this is when it's going to be on the selectmen's agenda.
Absolutely. Happy to do so.
Okay.
I have a question. So the priority list gets approved by the selectmen, and is submitted in the spring to Mass DOT. And then our downtown revitalization study gets done in April, May, June. And what happens if there are recommendations in that plan that could essentially be on that list? Is there some way to add those projects to the priority list?
Well, I think that they're already going to be on there. So Route 20 is not eligible to be included on the list because it is a state highway.
Okay.
But the other roadways within our prioritization area are already currently reflected on the prioritization plan list. And the way they're currently ranked is very high.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
think, yeah, we did that on purpose. We wanted to make sure that those improvements would be eligible for complete streets funding,
All right, good, very good.
even though we don't know exactly what that's going to look like.
Right,
We
right.
know we're going to do a sidewalk and street lighting project. The design, of course, is yet to be determined.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, it's moving along at a decent pace, at least as best we can move it along from our own town perspective. That completes the two major items on the agenda tonight. Is there any other business to be brought before the committee tonight that anybody has? Hearing none, I guess we have to approve the minutes from the October meeting. So are there any suggestions, comments, or changes to the minutes from the October meeting? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the October minutes as submitted?
So moved.
Is there a second for that?
Second,
All right, so I have to take a roll call vote on this. Julianne,
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Millie,
Yes,
Ashley,
Abstain. I wasn't there.
okay, Tracy,
yes.
Fran,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes,
Rick says yes. I guess that completes the committee members who are present tonight. Did I forget anybody? I don't think so. Okay, the minutes are approved. Having done that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
Can we get a copy of the slideshow so we can see those survey results so far, or?
Absolutely. I'll email that to you right when we complete this meeting.
All right,
that was
thanks.
great. Yeah.
Can I now have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, Julianne,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Ashley,
Aye.
Tracy,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Jean,
aye.
and Rick says aye. So we are officially adjourned. Thanks for everybody's participation tonight, and the next meeting will be December 15th. Good night
Thank you.
and
Thank
happy
you.
Thanksgiving.
Bye.